Good afternoon, everyone. Any questions from the previous class? Thank you. We were talking about sources of Sangam age. We discussed mostly the political developments of Sangam age. There are a few things which should be very clear. There are a lot of questions which are frankly unanswered. For example, dating the Tamil language, how old that is. That is again an unanswered question. We do know that in written form, perhaps it may have started around 3rd century or 4th century BC. But how old the language is, that is a very difficult question to answer. But at the same time, it should be also very clear that languages also evolve. So how Tamil was spoken thousands of years ago and how it is spoken today, there will be differences. And that is actually true for each and every language. In fact, the language which you speak, 15 years ago, आपके घर में जैसे बोला जाता था, there will be differences. There will be some new words, right? So things evolve, things change, and वो linguistics का job होगा कि उस change को trace करना, that how those changes are happening, and those changes actually are quite useful to know about historicity or history of any location. जैसे जब हम Vedic Age पढ़ रहे थे, so we talked about that how Rig Veda comprises of 10 mandalas, 10 books, and जो book first and book 10 है, that was compiled later. And the most important evidence which we have for is the linguistic analysis of the first and 10 book, because the first or 10th book है वो different है compared to the other books of Rig Veda. So linguistic analysis is a very useful tool when we study history. Anyways, in the previous class, I told you that with the help of trade, so agriculture of course is very important, but with the help of trade, we had these 3 great kingdoms in southern India, Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas. These 3 kingdoms are also mentioned in Ashokan inscription. And they may have been, in fact, just after the megalithic age, these kingdoms may have emerged. And the most important source to know about these kingdoms is Sangam age itself. So in today's class, I'm going to discuss about the first economic development, social and religious development during Sangam age. So let's start with the economic development. Let's start with economy during Sangam age. What type of economic setup we are talking about? So lot of things. First thing first, it should be very clear that even right now जो agriculture, animal rearing है वो बहुत सबसे important source of economy तो देखो वही है. So agriculture and animal rearing is very important. There are Sangam texts which mention division of land into different categories. One land applicable for, let's say, animal rearing, another which is fertile land, another which is for salt making, a land which remains infertile throughout the year. So different type of lands are mentioned. So agriculture is clearly a very important economic activity. We find evidence of many type of crops which we use even today. For example, we find rice, wheat, cotton, ragi, spices, lot of spices, because of course they were very popular, very important part of international trade. So we find both food and cash crops which were integral part of the agriculture. But apart from agriculture, the most important economic activity was the trading part. So all these 3 kingdoms, they maintained a surplus trade with contemporary Roman Empire. And around 1st century BC or 1st century AD, the discovery of monsoon wind, so that monsoon wind exists, and that actually facilitated the ocean voyages. And now there was a long maritime trade route which existed in ancient India and which maintained a contact between India and Europe. So lot of things became very popular in Europe which were originated into India. I already told you black pepper. Best example is black pepper. So much in demand, it is called Yavan Priya in many Sangam texts. But apart from that, there are many things in general: spices, precious stones, semi-precious stones, muslin clothes, lot of textiles, जो fine textile हम बोलते हैं. All of those things were exported item. And as a result, the prosperity of these kingdoms increased because the gold coin, we find many Roman coins into India. That does tell you about this trade relationship which existed in India. I may have also told you this in the last class, that there is a book called Natural History written by author Pliny, and Pliny says that the Roman treasury is being depleted because of its trade with India. So trade was very important. All these three kingdoms invested into premium ports. Through these premium ports, and of course there were great manufacturing center. Many cities emerged at this point of time, and those cities were manufacturing centers. We find many type of merchant classes here. Even today, words like Vanikam or Setti, all of these words are very popular, but all of these words go back to, in fact, ancient Sangam age. So trade is a very, very important economic activity. So kings के लिए जो सबसे important source of revenue है, जो state का important source of revenue है, that is of course agricultural tax. But second source of revenue is also the custom duty, that all the trading that was taxed, of course, and king in fact often through the kingdoms, through the state, lot of trade was sanctioned. But there was also a third source of income for state, and that is throughout it remains a theme, that these three kingdoms often fought many battles with each other, not necessarily royal battles which involved the kingdoms themselves, but the chiefs. So these kingdoms had many local chiefs, and these local chiefs fought battle with another local chiefs in the name of their king. When they fought battles, one side is going to emerge victorious often, and they are going to collect lot of war booty, जिसको हम बोलते हैं. So that war booty जो है, that will be also shared with the king. जो भी जिसके नाम पे, जैसे for example a local chief of Pandya king, he is fighting with a chief of Chola king, and if he emerges victorious, will share the war booty with the king. So that is also a very important source of revenue. In fact, ये जो पूरा battle जो है, so war, it's so important that there is a proper ethics of war. Very similar to how Mahabharata has a proper ethics of war, that you cannot attack someone who does not have a weapon in his hand. You cannot attack someone when there is a lot of, very similar to that we find war ethics, not just ethics as such in day-to-day life, but even war ethics is found. Especially warriors who have shown bravery and who have also shown perhaps mercy to their opponent, they have been given special status in the society. And there are, जैसे जो megalithic period था, that often you had this, at the center you have a grave, and around the center you have all these large stones. So not exactly the same practice, but we do have some special ceremony, burial ceremony for such warriors. So that is about the economics and how state is doing economy with what are the important sources of revenue for state. In terms of society, again things are very interesting. Jैसे one thing is very clear, the Brahmins appear for the first time in Sangam age in southern India. There are many stories in Puranas. So Sangam age themselves talk about Brahmins, Brahman poets, they are writing great poems for the kings. So एक तो वो source है ही, but even many Puranas, they talk about many stories. Now those stories of course are mythological in nature, they are religious in nature, but that does tell you about the migration of people from northern India, from Deccan region to southern India. जैसे there are two sages which are very popular. One sage is Parshuram, another sage is Agastya. So there is a very famous story about Agastya, that Agastya goes to southern India and then he orders the Deccan plateau that you have to, you're not going to grow until he returns back. But he never returns back, so the Deccan plateau hai, that never actually grows. So जो पूरा mountain है, that never grows. So again, all these legends. There is another legend associated with Parshuram, that Parshuram goes to the southernmost part of India and then he throws his axe, and basically all the area which has been covered by his axe, all that area, now he goes back to northern India, to Deccan region, and asks Brahmins to come and settle in this region. So all of these are stories, these are mythological stories, but nonetheless, even these stories have some basis, that we are talking about large scale migration from northern India, Deccan region to southern India, and we cannot, just often historians use that because all of these things, जैसे Varna system became of course very popular in southern India in later time. But that does not mean that during Sangam age we can call Aryanization, that Aryan culture has become supreme. In fact, if anything, there is a unique culture. And by the way, that always happens, that whenever two group of people are interacting with each other, then some sort of unique feature will emerge which will incorporate features from both the cultures, and that is what exactly happened here. This is one of the most important deity who was worshipped in southern India was Murugan, but later of course Murugan also took the form of Kartikeya, son of Lord Shiva. Right, so there are many interesting, ये जो religious development है, that also tells you about the type of interaction which is happening among different groups of people. So Brahmins appeared, Varna system was definitely known, but it was not practiced. जो Varna system है, जो rigidity of Varna system which had emerged into northern India, that was definitely not there in southern India at this point of time. Again, the key word is at this point of time. It of course definitely become very rigid. The concept of Varna caste जो है, that becomes very powerful in later period. But at the same time, that does not mean कि society जो है काफी equal है. Society is very unequal. Society में काफी inequality है. There are rich classes. So जो basis of classification है, that is not Varna, but that is class basically. And that class classification is very much important. For example, you have rich peasants, you have peasants who do not have any land. Often rich peasants maintain good relationship with warrior class also. So society is very much unequal, but this inequality or this stratification in the society is not because of Varna, but because of clan in fact. Clan, class, these are the important reasons behind the social stratification. Right? तो ये सारी चीजें कुछ पता होनी चाहिए हमको. Regarding जैसे one of the, when we talk about social development, one question which always emerges is what about status of women? So one thing can be said, for example, many Sangam poets जो है, they are women poets. Many का मतलब out of 1,000 perhaps 30-40. So the number is not very high, but nonetheless there is a number. That does tell that women had access to education, but that does not mean कि society जो है किसी तरीके से कुछ matriarchal society है. Except perhaps जो Pandya king, मैंने last class में बताया था कि when Megasthenes visited Pandya king, he found that it is being ruled by a woman ruler. ये discuss किया था हमने. Right, but overall society, जो succession है, जो access to property है, all of those things, sons have more right than daughters. ये काफी clear है यहाँ से. So that is one question. There is another very interesting social development is that we do find some element of sati in Sangam age. Sati is, if I'm very sure all of you know about sati, but this is a voluntary concept. That there are some cases where it is mentioned that women burn themselves or kill themselves after death of their husband. But that does not mean कि ये कोई social practice है and women are being forced into doing it. But there are some cases where it has happened. Right? Of course, it takes a very rigid form in later period, especially in northern India. So that happens. जो sati as a social practice where women are being forced, that happens later. तो अभी जो evidences of sati हैं, at some instances it is mentioned, but it is not considered as such an obligation that you have to do it. Right? So these are some of the social and economic developments which we should be aware about. So you can write down just few things here. Agriculture and animal rearing. Agriculture and animal rearing. Animal rearing were the major economic activity. Major economic activity. For example, Tolkapiyam. Tolkapiyam is a very important book. I told you in the last class it is a book about Tamil grammar. Tolkapiyam. So even though this is a book about Tamil grammar, it has a lot of information about economy and society. As per Tolkapiyam, the land was divided in 5 categories. Land was divided into 5 categories. Five categories. Kurinji, in bracket just mention, land of hilly tracts for hunting and gathering. Land of hilly tracts for hunting and gathering. For hunting and gathering. Next, Mulai. This was pastoral land for animal rearing. Pastoral land for animal rearing. Palai. Palai was arid land, infertile land basically. Marudam. So Marudam hai, that is agricultural land. And last, Neetal. So Neetal is land for salt making. For salt making. So basically coastal land. The Neetal hai, that was coastal land. Fishing, salt making. The chief crops were, write down, chief crops were rice, cotton, ragi, sugarcane, spices such as rice, cotton, ragi, sugarcane, spices such as pepper, turmeric, cardamom, cinnamon, etc. Spices such as pepper, turmeric, cardamom, cinnamon, etc. By the way, जो southern rivers है वो a perennial river है नहीं, so they are seasonal rivers. So the concept of dams, embankments, that was popular even during this period of time. आप लिख सकते हो. Agricultural activities were facilitated. Agricultural activities were facilitated. Were facilitated by building dams, tanks, other economic activities included spinning, weaving, shipbuilding. Other economic activities included spinning, weaving, shipbuilding, carpentry, etc. Write down next point. Both inland and foreign trade, both inland and foreign trade was well established. Both inland and foreign trade was well established. Many trade related terms such as Vanikam, Chattan, Nigam, are mentioned. Vanikam, Chattan, Nigam are mentioned in certain inscriptions, or in inscriptions. Vanikam, Chattan, Nigam are mentioned in inscriptions. Salt merchants were called Umanar. Salt merchants were called Umanar. Mobile merchants were called chattu, mobile merchants who basically roamed around from place to place. Mobile merchants were called chattu. Trade with Romans, trade with Romans, was significant for all the three kingdoms. All the three kingdoms. In fact, in natural history, in the book Natural History, Pliny complains that Roman Empire was drained of gold. Because of trade with India. Can you ask another pen drive? This is not working. Exported items were precious stones, fine textile, spices, sandalwood, etc. Black pepper was a coveted item for Romans. Black pepper was a coveted item for Romans. It was called Yavan Priya. Black pepper was a coveted item for Romans. It was called Yavan Priya. Some imported items were gold and silver, corals, lead, and slave girls. Recently I follow many historians on Twitter. Recently I came across a very interesting description that around 1st century BC, a ship was found stuck by some merchants. That ship, the description of people who were on that ship was clearly they were Indians, and they were then captured and they were sent to Roman king and they were enslaved. So again, slavery was very popular in both Greek and Roman kingdom. Right, so again, a very new discovery that we have found an inscription, not inscription exactly, a page where this has been described, that group of people, because of the type of clothing they are wearing, historians think that they were Indians and they were captured, they were perhaps lost their way, or for any reason they were captured and they were given as slaves to the Roman ruler. Anyways, write down in next paragraph. The chief sources of state income were land revenue, custom duty, and war booty called array, paid by local feudatories. Let's talk about the society and religion. Give the heading society and religion. Right on here. The concept of Varna system was known in the Sangam age. The concept of Varna system was known in the Sangam age. However, it did not become the basis of social stratification. It did not become the basis of social stratification. Right on next point. Society was unequal. And the basis of stratification was clan. Clan के लिए the word which is mentioned by the way is Kuti. There were no restrictions on interdining and social interactions. There were no restrictions on interdining and social interaction among different Kuti groups. The rich peasants were called Velalas. They employed Kadaisiar who constituted the lowest class in the society. Thus, there were sharp inequalities in the society. in the society. Write down. The class of warriors, write down next point. The class of warriors were given special status. For example, captain of the army was given the title of Inadi. Captain of the army was given the title of Inadi. Those who died fighting comma, memorial stones were erected for them. Called Nadukul Virukal. Write down next point. So this is about social stratification. Write down next point. Some Sangam poets were women. And it is believed that women had access to education. And they were respected in the society. However, there is also a mention a practice similar to sati, called Tipayadal, though it was not obligatory. Write down the next paragraph. Important deity who was worshipped by people was Murugan. Murugan was also called Subramanya. Many Brahminical practices such as sacrifices started becoming popular. This Vedic sacrifices, we have talked about many Vedic sacrifices, Ashwamedh. So similar sacrifices, they started becoming popular. The concept of yajna hai basically, that started becoming popular. Both Buddhism and Jainism both Buddhism and Jainism also influenced the religious practices worship of Shiva and Vishnu became popular during this period. Worship of Shiva and Vishnu became popular during this period. So this is about some of the features about society and religion. UPSC का बड़ा एक favorite topic रहे. This I will show you few questions from the prelims examination. Let's in fact solve few questions today for prelims examination, at least from the topics we have discussed till now. जैसे let's start with a very unusual question, not a factual frankly. Ancient India के generally जो questions होते हैं बड़े factual से होते हैं, but there are some interesting questions also. So look at this question. India maintained its early cultural contacts and trade links with Southeast Asia across the Bay of Bengal. For this preeminence of early maritime history of Bay of Bengal, which of the following could be the most convincing explanations? What do you think should be the answer? Let's read all of the options. As compared to other countries, India had a better shipbuilding technology in ancient and medieval times. That's not necessarily true. So Greeks, Romans, Persians, they had again very good shipbuilding technology. So saying that we had better, perhaps in medieval India, just especially the Cholas hain, they maintained of course a very powerful shipbuilding. Imperial Cholas, not the Sangam age Cholas. Imperial Cholas, and of course by the time of Shivaji we had a great navy. But ye jo hai statement, first statement, that is not true. The rulers of southern India always patronized traders, Brahmin priests and Buddhist monks in this context. Third is monsoon winds across the Bay of Bengal facilitated sea voyages. Now, the third statement, that is actually very a tricky statement. Monsoon did facilitate trade, but in Bay of Bengal, not exactly in Southeast Asia. Again, remember the question is talking about trade with Southeast Asia. Java, Sumatra, हम इस region की बात कर रहे हैं. जो monsoon facilitation है, that did happen, but from the European side, not to the Southeast Asian side. तो इसीलिए geography जो है, knowledge of geography actually is going to help you in answering this question. So second option is the most appropriate answer here, B, that many kings जो है, they patronized monks, traders, and again remember, because monks and traders, they played a very important role in spreading of ideas. Early cultural contact and trade links, so the patronage part hai, that especially traders who went to different part of the world. So जो B option है, that is the most appropriate answer. C is wrong because of geography, not because of history. ये सारे क्वेश्चंस किए थे हमने. अच्छा ठीक है, तो इसको कर लेते हैं. चलो इसी बहाने हमारा इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन भी थोड़ा रिवाइज हो जाएगा. Regarding the Indus Valley Civilization, consider the following statements. It was predominantly a secular civilization and the religious element, though present, did not dominate the scene. During this period, cotton was used for manufacturing textiles in India. Why do you think second is wrong? Cotton trade तो हमेशा से इंडिया में बड़ा पॉपुलर है. we do find that cotton जो है, not only it was produced in India, it was actually traded all across the world. Even in ancient, during Indus Valley Civilization, India maintained a surplus trade. First statement is of course true, that yes, religious figures are present, but they do not dominate the scene. And how can we come to this conclusion? Because we do not find grand temples or such type of structures. Second statement is also true. Now this is a very interesting question. The dharma and reeth depict a central idea of ancient Vedic civilization of India. Consider the following statement. क्या होना चाहिए आंसर? ये हमने डिस्कस किया था. सी इज द करेक्ट आंसर. When we talk about dharma, basically we are talking about moral obligations, the sense of right and wrong. It is not about just religion, but it is actually about discharging one's duty. What is the correct duty? Depending upon who you are, your duties can be different. As a father, as a son, as a husband, as a person of a particular reason, as a member of clan, as your head of household, your duties can be different. But those duties have to align with a fundamental law which governs all of the society. And in fact, it is even more fundamental, that entire universe is governed with it, and that is called reeth. So, both statements are, they are correct. Reeth was the fundamental moral law governing the functioning of universe and all it contained. And dharma is individual obligations in personal capacity. That again, whatever role you are playing into different capacity. How about this question? Religion of early Vedic Aryan was primarily of again C is the C बहुत सारे correct है. So if you think about it, C is the most appropriate answer. Image worship तो सबसे पहले आप eliminate कर सकते हैं. Bhakti you can also eliminate. When we talk about bhakti, then there is a lot of focus on, very similar to image worship. So even though D can also be, for example, worship of nature is clearly true, that different natural forces, they are given, they are deified, they are given a physical form and they are worshipped. But what is the nature of worship? So nature of worship is through sacrifices, even though initially the sacrifices are just all the coming together, chanting, but performing yagyas, but this yagya did not involve, for example, large scale animal sacrifices or something like that, just using milk, ghee, those things played a more important role. So jo yagya hai, that worship of nature and yagya, that is the correct answer here. Shreni we haven't discussed. Juanjang we haven't discussed. This is a very difficult question. क्या होगा? डी. पहला तो हम एलिमिनेट कर ही सकते हैं ना. बर्जो हम तो कम से कम हमने डिस्कस किया होगा कि देखो बर्जो हम जो है नियोलिथिक साइट है, वेरी फेमस फॉर इट्स पिट ड्वेलिंग कल्चर फाउंड इन जम्मू एंड कश्मीर. You do not find rock cut shrines here. Barzoham is a very important place, but a Neolithic site known for pit dwelling culture. A lot of pits are found here. Maybe it was used to store food grain. You have to eliminate first, and then you have to, you know that third is true. But Chandra Ketugarh, that is again a difficult question, but both second and third are correct. According to Kautilya's Arthashastra, which of the following are correct? देखो, अगर हमको कुछ भी नहीं पता इस क्वेश्चन में तो आइडियली नहीं करना चाहिए अटेम्प्ट, सबसे पहली चीज तो, बट बिकॉज दिस इज अ वेरी नीश थीम, बहुत ही नीश चीज पूछ रखा है, अर्थशास्त्र के फाइंडिंग में पूछ रखा है, बट फिर भी थोड़ा बहुत हम गेस कर सकते हैं. जैसे हाउ आई एम गोइंग टू अप्रोच दिस क्वेश्चन, अगेन दिस इज बेस्ड ऑन पोस्ट फैक्टो एनालिसिस. एग्जाम के बाहर बैठ के एनालाइज करना हमेशा आसान है, एग्जाम में बैठ के अटेम्प्ट करना हमेशा मुश्किल है. So my analysis, when I saw this question, I frankly did not know. So again, outside examination analyzing is very easy. So I know that either one, the way options are arranged, either one of the statement is wrong or all of them are correct. देखो ऑप्शन देख के भी हिंट मिलता है. तो either I have to find the outlier statement, that which is not correct, or if I cannot find one, then all of the three statements are correct. A person could be a slave as a result of judicial punishment. If I have to find out of these three statements, this is the most obvious statement for me. Yes, that seems like a plausibility. So first statement, again, only one is wrong here. Second, if a female slave bore her master a son, she was legally free. If a son born to female slave was fathered by her master, the son was entitled to the legal status of master's son. If you do not have any knowledge about slavery in ancient India, then you may think that both second and third are not correct, right? Because दोनों ही logically जिस तरीके से हम slavery को perceive करते हैं, then both second and third does not seem like a correct statement. But I do not have any option which is, so for example, अगर मेरे लिए one only and two and three होता, तो मैं one only mark करके आता मैं. But I know that ऐसा है नहीं कोई option, so I will mark that all three of them correct. If second is true, then third can also be true. And if third is true, then second also can be true. So again, such type of not a very good logic, frankly, and again outside examination paper. So ideally इस type का अगर कोई niche question आए जहाँ पे आपको नहीं information है तो आप skip भी कर सकते हो, and there is nothing wrong with it. UPSC will give you few questions जो आपको skip करना है. This will be one of those questions. Anyways, the answer is D here, 1, 2 and 3. This we already have discussed. This question. Is correct. करेक्ट ढूंढना है. B is of course the correct answer here. बट अगर आपको नहीं पता हो तो फिर ये ढूंढना बड़ा मुश्किल है, बिकॉज ऑप्शन बड़े ही क्लोज बनाए यूपीएससी ने. संगम पोएम्स आर डिवाइड ऑफ एनी रेफरेंस टू मटेरियल कल्चर. चलो इसको तो हम एलिमिनेट कर सकते हैं. एनी रेफरेंस ऑफ मटेरियल कल्चर, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट some of the greatest poetry of ancient India, and there is no reference of material culture. That does not seem like a logical statement. So first, chalo fir bhi I can eliminate that. This seems like a wrong statement. Sangam poems have no reference to warrior ethic. This again is a niche statement. Clearly it is not correct. In fact, there is a class of work, Sangam poetry, which talks about morality, and morality in a lot of things, including ethics of warrior. This is also not correct. Sangam literature refers to magic forces as irrational. We already have talked about Shelapa Dikara, Mani Meklai, all of these stories, all of them are based on magic, some elements of chamatkar jo hai ek tarike se. So, and by the way, those are very important part of the plot, right? So this is also not correct. The correct answer is B, that social classification of Varna was known to the Sangam poets. However, एक चीज बहुत clear होना चाहिए कि this was not a very well established practice into the society at this point of time. We haven't discussed this. चलो एक simple सा question. Both these questions. Which one of the following is not a Harappan site? Chanudaro, Kotdiji, Sohagora, Desalpur. The correct answer is C here. Sohagora is a very very famous place. By the way, you should know about Sohagora. Sohagora में हमको सबसे पुराना जो कॉपर इंस्क्रिप्शन है, Sohagora में we have found copper plate inscription. It is in Uttar Pradesh. And this copper plate inscription tells you about famine relief, that somebody has done some famine relief work. There is a lot of debate which age it belongs to, but the most obvious candidates are either it is pre-Mauryan or Mauryan period. So either just before Mauryan period or during Mauryan period this inscription belongs to. It is written in Brahmi script. Copper plate inscription talks about famine relief. A very famous inscription, but that is not a Harappan site. Chanudaro, Kotdiji, Desalpur, they are Harappan site. This question: in which of the following relief sculpture inscription is Ranyo Ashoka mentioned along with the stone portrait of Ashok? देखो, अशोक के पोर्ट्रेट दो जगह मिलते हैं. The two places are A and B. However, at B you do not find the name Ranyo Ashoka. In fact, it was not known that who this person is. When people found another statue, another sculpture at Kanganhalli, that is in Karnataka, and it was written there Ranyo Ashoka, King Ashoka, then it was very clear that the other sculpture at Sanchi is also of Ashok. So anyways, the correct answer here is A, Kanganhalli, not B. With reference to difference between the culture of Rig Vedic Aryans and Indus Valley people, which of the following statements are correct? यूपीएससी का जो फाइनल आंसर था वो गलत था. फर्स्ट थिंग आई शुड टेल यू दैट यूपीएससी का जो फाइनल आंसर यूपीएससी ने अपने ऑफिशियल आंसर की में दिया था वो गलत था. गलत इसलिए था, सेकेंड स्टेटमेंट इज क्लियरली नॉट करेक्ट. इंडस वैली पीपल न्यू कॉपर एंड आयरन, दैट इज क्लियरली नॉट करेक्ट, राइट. जो आयरन एज है, जो पोस्ट वैदिक पीरियड है, वी कैन कॉल दैट, एंड महाजनपद पीरियड वी कैन कॉल दैट एज आयरन एज. इफ आई एलिमिनेट सेकेंड, then first is true, which by the way is true. Third, I have to now think about Rig Vedic Aryans had domesticated horses. Now that is true. That is of course true. There is no evidence of Indus Valley people having aware of this animal. This question I do remember when we were preparing the answer key. I do remember that all of these three statements were picked up from one textbook. That textbook was written in 1980s, 1990s. Again, ancient history में बहुत सारी books लिखी हुई हैं. The problem is that जो discovery of Shurkotara है, which I told you that at Shurkotara we do find horse bones, that discovery occurred later, and that does tell you that horse bones were present. Also, this in itself is such an extreme statement. We are talking about people who were involved into long-term maritime trade route as well as land-based trade route, and you are saying that they were not even aware about the existence of horses. But nonetheless, we do know that horses, even though were not very prevalent, but nonetheless they were found into India. Perhaps they were imported. So third statement is frankly, even today if this question is again, I am going to consider third statement to be wrong statement. But nonetheless, जो UPSC का official answer की था, वहाँ पे answer था 1 and 3 only. ये तो बहुत easy question है. James Prinsep, ये भी easy question है. Which one of the following books of ancient India has the love story of son of founder of Shunga dynasty? हमने डिस्कस किया था मालविका अग्निमित्रम. पुष्यमित्र शुंग का जो बेटा है, his name is Agnimitra, and Agnimitra and Malvika is a courtesan. That love story is mentioned in Malvika Agnimitram. चलो ठीक है. So let's come to, हाँ जी, हाँ जी. सन का प्रेफरेंस ओवर डॉटर, ये मैं क्यों बोलूंगा, मैं ऐसे हमको एविडेंस नहीं मिलता है. सन का प्रेफरेंस ओवर डॉटर वी डू फाइंड इन वैदिक लिटरेचर, इन पुराणास, इन धर्म शास्त्रस, बट इन संगम एज सच नहीं मेंशन्ड है. नहीं, यज्ञ में जैसे जो आपका क्वेश्चन है, आपने बोला संगम के रेफरेंस में दैट सन इज प्रिफर्ड ओवर डॉटर. नहीं, संगम लिटरेचर में हमको ऐसे कहीं कुछ लिखा हुआ तो नहीं है. माई स्टेटमेंट वॉज वेरी सिंपल दैट women, even though were respected, they had access to education, but that is not enough to say that society was not patriarchal. That was my only statement. जहां तक आपका जो स्टेटमेंट है that preference of son, that is actually true in case of later Vedic age as well as Mahajanpat age. This is a very famous book. I told you in the previous class also, Erythraean Sea. This book called Erythraean Sea, Periplus of Erythraean Sea. So Erythraean Sea is basically Indian Ocean here. And this book, even though we do not know the author, that in detail talks about the trade between India and Roman Empire. Anyways, the next topic which I am going to discuss is again a very, very important topic, next theme. And in fact, once I complete that topic, 80-85% of ancient history जो हमारा complete हो जाएगा, that is Gupta period. So again I am going back to northern India. तो अभी तक हमने हिस्ट्री को देखो कैसे ट्रेस किया है. फ्रॉम द टाइम ऑफ इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन देयर इज अ गैप. यू हैव वैदिक एज व्हिच कैन बी डिवाइडेड इनटू टू पार्ट across 1000 year, almost 1000 year, and that 1000 year by the way is a huge period of time. So the type of interaction, how society will develop, evolve. We also talked about Mahajanpat age, we talked about emergence of Magad, we talked about decline of Magad also. We talked about invasions which occurred from northwest India, and simultaneously another empire in Deccan region called Satvahana Empire emerged. And of course then we talked about Cholas, Cheras, Pandyas. So all this development, India already had established itself as one of the richest countries of the world. There was a research done by Economist magazine few years ago, and using the information, using the tools, they tried to determine the GDP of the world in different centuries, and they tried to determine their contribution of different countries to the GDP. And they did this calculation since 1st century AD, and from 1st century AD till 14th, 15th century AD, India was most of the time, out of like 12 times, for 12 centuries India was at the top. For 2 centuries India was at second, China was at the top. But by the time Europeans came, of course, our contribution to world GDP decreased significantly. But इसमें जो सबसे rich time जो है, where India's contribution to the world GDP was highest, is the Gupta age. So that is my next theme in ancient history, that Gupta period. So there is first, let's trace the continuity. We should not understand Gupta age different from all the developments which has happened till now. So Gupta age emerged into 3rd century, late 3rd century. Often people confuse that Gupta जो empire का जो founder है, his name was Chandragupta, but that is actually not true. Chandragupta can be considered the first emperor, but the first king was a person called Shrigupta. Shrigupta and his ancestors, they may have been very rich local rulers, and they may actually have been feudatories of Kushanas. Why I am saying it? Because Kushana Empire declined by 230 AD, and Shrigupta emerged as independent kingdom by like 240, 250 AD. So there is a very small gap here. So there is a very good chance that जो Guptas हैं, जो Shrigupta हैं and his family, the family he belonged to, they may have been local rulers, feudatories under Kushana rule. They may have played a very important role on the Uttar Path, which basically was connected to the ancient silk trade route. Discuss किया था हमने, and because of this trade, they became very prosper. So when Kushanas declined, there was a power vacuum, and that power vacuum was filled by Guptas. जो पूरा गुप्ता एज है, that is called golden age of ancient India because of 2 reasons. First, literally the amount of gold coin, the Guptas issued, they were the highest. Literally, so there is one reason. But that is not the actual reason why we call it Golden Age. The actual reason is the development which happened into different fields, especially science, astronomy, literature, art and culture. वो जो development है, that is unparalleled, not in India, but in any part of the world. The type of literature, all of the books which we read even today, they were given their final form during Gupta period, such as Ramayana or Mahabharata or many Puranas, many Upanishads. Some of the greatest work of literature were compiled during this period. So in terms of literary development, in terms of development in science, for example, great names like Varahamir or Aryabhat, all of them lived during Gupta period. Some of the greatest named in literature like Kalidas, they lived in Gupta period. So why we call this period as Golden Age of ancient India? Because of the contribution which occurred into many fields, not one, but many fields. And at the same time, India at this point of time was contributing about 30 to 33% of world's GDP. So 1/3 of world's GDP was coming from India. That is because of the land they basically occupied, a very fertile land. And that is also because of the trade, inland trade as well as foreign trade. So inland trade especially was very prosperous. So first thing first, we always talk about the identity of the rulers, that who are Guptas. So सबसे जो accepted theory ये है कि Guptas were Vaishyas. And there is a reason why this is the most accepted theory, because as per certain Dharma Shutra's book, there are titles given for different Varnas. The most preferred title for a person who is a Brahman is Sharman. The most preferred title for a Kshatriya is Varman. The most preferred title for Vaishyas is Gupta. And the most preferred title for Shudra is Das. So you have 4 titles given into certain Dharma Shastras: Sharman, Varman, Guptas and Das. So Gupta's ka surname is Gupta. Because of that, many historians think that they may have been Vaishyas. However, some historians also contend that may not be true. But nonetheless, this is the most accepted theory as of now, that they were Vaishya. However, to enhance their social prestige, they married into Kshatriya clans. For example, the first emperor of Gupta king, his name was Chandragupta. Chandragupta married a Lichvi prince, the same Lichvi who had ruled Vaishali. And even though their power had declined, clearly they were still a very prestigious name. So Lichvis are again very old name, and their power clearly was not that much what it was during Mahajanpat age, but the family was still very prestigious. So the very first king, first emperor, he married a Lichvi princess. And many historians think that it may have occurred because they wanted to enhance their social prestige by marrying into Kshatriya family. So Gupta Empire at one point of time included significant part of India, not as large as Ashoka, but definitely, for example, the first king is Sri Gupta. His son Ghatotkacha became the next ruler, and Ghatotkacha's son was Chandragupta I, who is considered the first emperor of Gupta Empire. Chandragupta rule included this part, जो Ganga Yamuna Doab region है, again a very fertile region. He made Patliputra as his capital. They may have been, Guptas may have originated perhaps into region of Uttar Pradesh, but they made Patliputra as their capital, again because of the ancient glory of Patliputra. And Chandragupta, one son, the first emperor, his name was Samudragupta. Now Samudragupta started his campaign from Patliputra, and he fought with many kings. And there is a very famous inscription called Prayag Prashasti. So I'm using a word here, Prashasti. Prashasti simply means that often poets of the rulers, they wrote in praise about their king. Such type of praise is called Prashasti. So one of the most famous Prashasti is Prayag Prashasti, that is found in Allahabad, jo abhi Prayagraj has been renamed as Prayagraj. On the same Ashokan inscription, that Ashoka is also talking about his idea of Dhamma, but on the same pillar you also find Prayag Prashasti. And in Prayag Prashasti, Samudragupta conquest, throughout his conquest, it is mentioned in detail that who were the rulers who Samudragupta defeated. But often he did not as such annex their territories. He just subjugated them. He asked their loyalty, that you have to accept Samudragupta as the emperor, But he did not annex, he did not kill them also. And he did not also lose a single war throughout his battle. So entire his life, he entered into many conquests. Many things are given about Samudragupta. It is also mentioned that he was a great poet himself. He was a musician also. Jaise there is a very famous coin issued by Samudragupta where he is holding a veena. And in the inscription also it is mentioned that he himself was a great composer of veena. So Samudragupta further expanded the territory. He did defeat these regions, but nonetheless he did not annex them. However, he did annex in the region of Punjab and other part of again जो Ganga Indus tributaries जो है, certain regions of. At this point of time, in the Deccan region you have another set of rulers called Vaktak. Vaktak were successors of Satvahans, but Vaktaks were allies of Guptas. So Guptas and Vaktaks का as such कोई enmity नहीं था. So Samudragupta had no as such intention of attacking Vaktaks. But another very powerful rule here was Shakas, which we have talked about in the previous class, that how Shakas, even though they ruled northwest frontier, but in this part they were defeated by Parthians first and then by Kushanas, but in the region of Gujarat they remained. Even though their power was challenged a lot by Satvahans, but nonetheless, जो western Kshatraps हैं, they actually remained very powerful. After death of Samudragupta, there is a very interesting story. Initially it was only considered a story that Samudragupta son, his name was Ramgupta, he becomes the ruler. And Ramgupta is not a very brave ruler. So he is attacked by Shaka ruler, and Shaka ruler basically asks him that if you do not want to fight the battle, you have to send your queen to me. And Ramgupta accepts this demand. Ramgupta does it, but that is not taken light by his brother, who is Chandragupta II. And Chandragupta II takes the form of a woman, goes to the enemy camp, kills the Shaka king and comes back, and later then he somehow, so by the way, Ramgupta clearly knows that Chandragupta II is now, of course, he has been insulted while Chandragupta II has shown bravery. So he wants Chandragupta to be killed. However, Chandragupta II in a plot kills his brother. He becomes the ruler, and then he attacks Shakas, defeats them completely, annexes this territory also, and after this defeat he takes the title of Vikramaditya, which was again taken by another ruler from ancient India who had defeated Shakas in Ujjain. So again, Vikramaditya title. So Chandragupta II takes the title of Vikramaditya. He starts his own calendar called Gupta calendar, but that is not a very popular calendar as such. But nonetheless, he starts a calendar and he shifts his capital, not shifts his capital, he makes Ujjain his second capital. Apart from Patliputra, Ujjain is also second capital. And in the Ujjain court, now he has the 9 great poets, 9 great persons, collectively known as Nauratnas. Right? Kalidas, for example, is one of the Nauratnas. So Ramgupta ka jo story hai, initially historians thought that it is only a story because there is no as such proof that a person called Ramgupta existed or not. But now we have proof. There are statues, we have discovered statues where clearly it is mentioned that a person called Ramgupta is the ruler. But ये story फिर भी कितना authentic है that Chandragupta II takes the form of a woman, goes and kill the Shaka ruler. That part may not be true, but Ramgupta may have existed. Nonetheless, Chandragupta II during this period of time, जो Gupta's rule है, that was all in this entire region. Vaktak were allies. So except southern India, almost all of India was under their command. Then Skandagupta becomes the ruler. Gupta rule further reached its zenith. But this is also the period of time when another set of invasions started happening from northwest frontier. They are called Hunas, a group of nomads who originated into again Central Asian region. And Hunas started their attack, even though initially they were defeated by a Skandagupta, but they were very persistent in their attack. So after death of a Skandagupta, Hunas attack continued, और जो later Gupta rulers हैं, they were not very powerful, and because of that Huna invasion actually played a very important role in decline of Gupta. Gupta Empire weakened. That led to emergence of many local rulers. These local rulers did not accept authority of Guptas. And by the way, ये same Huns हैं, same Hun who also defeated, who also were cause of Roman decline of Roman Empire. So in ancient Europe, one of the greatest empire was Roman Empire. Same group of people called Hunas, and almost simultaneously that one group attacked Europe, another group attacked India. There is hardly a gap of like few decades, 2-3 decades. But a persistent attack in India, a persistent attack in Rome, belonging to the same group of people, and that led to decline of Gupta Empire here and also Roman Empire here. Many cities which had became some of the greatest center of manufacturing, they came to ruin because of Huna invasion. So we'll talk about that also. So this is the political development, that you have Sri Gupta, Ghatotkacha, you have Chandragupta I, Samudragupta, Chandragupta II, Skandagupta, some of the early and some of the great rulers of Gupta Empire. But apart from that, जो society and जो religious development है, that which happened during Gupta age, even today many of those ideas are very popular. So some of the books which were compiled during this period of time in religion, in law, they actually are even today a source that how our social norms are practiced today, or not social norms but some of the laws also. जैसे 2 books which by the way UPSC ने question पूछा था last year, not last year, that was a very difficult question frankly, and that question was asked because of current affairs. So frankly it is not a question of ancient India. The theme is ancient India, but question was actually from current affairs. There was a case in Supreme Court regarding succession, that daughters का right है कि नहीं father के property में. The Supreme Court used the reference of 2 legal systems which were very popular in ancient India, called Mitakshara system and Dayabhag system. So those who have law as a background, they will recognize that these 2 are again very important sources of law even today, very important part of our jurisprudence. So ये न्यूज में थे जिसके कारण यूपीएससी ने क्वेश्चन पूछा था. इंडियन एक्सप्रेस ने डिटेल में कवर कर रखा था अबाउट मिताक्षरा एंड दयाभाग सिस्टम, बट दे वेर ऑल्सो कंपाइल्ड इन almost after decline of Gupta period, but again in the same continuity. India became so rich that many foreign travelers all across the world, they talked about coming to India. Jaise I already have told you that Xuanzang, who came to India, he does mention before coming back to India that all of the great persons go to India to acquire knowledge. All of the great scholars come to India to acquire knowledge. So give this heading, Gupta Empire. Gupta Empire. So first let's start with sources. So there are many literary sources. Write down in only bullet points. Many Puranas such as Narad Puran, Vishnu, Brihaspati, Bhagwat, Skand, Markandeya Puran, among others. Then there are books written regarding social morality, regarding law. For example, a very famous person called Katyayan. Katyayan wrote Smritis. For example, he talks about society, roles and obligations of different type of people. Then another very famous book is a book called Niti Sar, written by Kamandak. Then of course work of Kalidas. You can write down few names. Abhigyan Shakuntalam, Meghdutam, Raghuvansham, Kumar Sambhavam, बहुत क्लियर होना चाहिए, none of the books I am writing here, they have been written from historical perspective. All of these are stories, except Niti Sar and Vatyayan Smritis. These are books about society, about right and wrong. So again, it does tell you about what type of society we are talking about. The work of Kalidas hai, the setup of Abhigyan Shakuntalam, that is a story of Shakuntala. Meghdutam is a story about that how there are two lovers sending message with the help of clouds. Right, Raghuvansham talks about Raghuvansh, where Lord Ram belonged to, the dynasty Lord Ram belonged to. So all of these works are, many of these works are work of religion, frankly, but at the same time, the context, the setup they were written in, that does throw light about Gupta period. Next is Vishakha Dutt work. So Vishakha Dutt is very famous for two books. One book I already have told you in the previous class, Mudra Rakshas. But Mudra Rakshas is the story of Chandragupta Maurya, that how Chandragupta Maurya with the help of Kautilya defeats Dhananand, and then there is a plot to kill Chandragupta Maurya by one of the minister of Dhananand. His name is Rakshas, but Rakshas is always outwitted by Chanakya. But Chanakya also does not kill him because he recognizes the talent of Rakshas, and at the end of story he persuades him that rather than plotting to kill Chandragupta Maurya, he should become a minister. So that is the story of Mudra Rakshas, not about Gupta, again, however written during Gupta period. But there is another book called Devi Chandraguptam. Now this book is about the story of Chandragupta II / Vikramaditya, and main plot is that how he takes the form of a woman, goes to Shaka ruler camp and kills the king and rescues the queen. तो ये जो story है, main plot जो है वो देवी चंद्रगुप्तम से आता है. So historians did not know if this Ramagupta character is actually a historical character, or, and why historians will have this difficulty, because जब भी कोई रूलर होगा, मान लो कोई रूलर का खुद का सक्सेसर नहीं हुआ, और फॉर एनी रीजन रूलर वाज सक्सीडेड बाय हिज ब्रदर, राइट, तो जो ब्रदर होगा और ब्रदर के जो बच्चे होंगे, व्हेन दे विल राइट अबाउट देयर जीनोलॉजी, दैट देयर एंसेस्टर्स, दे विल नॉट टॉक अबाउट देयर अंकल, दे विल टॉक अबाउट देयर फादर. सो इन मेनी, जहां पे भी इंस्क्रिप्शंस हमको मिलते हैं, वेयर ऑल ऑफ द गुप्ता रूलर्स आर मेंशन्ड टुगेदर, रामगुप्ता इज नॉट मेंशन्ड. So that is why historians did not think that he is a historical character. But now we have actually found some sculptures where the name Ramagupta is mentioned, and that belongs to Gupta period. So this is again a very famous book, Devi Chandraguptam. Account of Chinese traveler Fahian. Account of Fahian visited India during the time of Chandragupta II. There is another very, very famous book. One of the greatest work of drama is a book called Mrich Katika, written by a person named Shudrak. This is a book about lot of political ploys, conspiracies. However, the literal translation of Mrich Katika is small carts made of clay. Mrich Katika. And the author Shudrak hai, he calls himself a king. But who is King Shudrak, that is not very clear. He may have been perhaps a local feudatory under Gupta ruler. But जो मृच कटिका का जो पूरा plot है, it's a very complex plot involving many characters. But the story does tell you about the political setup during Gupta period. And one more book which you can mention. Now we do not have to pretend what this book is all about, but at the same time, this book also talks a lot about gender relationship, that role of men and women in the household. So Kama Sutra by Vatsyayan. This was also compiled during this period. So the significance of this book is to understand gender relationship in the household. So apart from all these literary sources, we also have epigraphy. And by the way, there are many more books which can be mentioned when we talk about Gupta period. So when we talk about inscriptions, the most famous inscription is Prayag Prashasti. प्रयाग प्रशस्ति, इसमें एक लाइन लिख लेना. It was composed by the court poet of Samudragupta Hari Sen, court poet of Samudragupta Hari Sen. It is inscribed on the Ashokan pillar. It is inscribed on an Ashokan pillar. It is inscribed on an Ashokan pillar in Prayagraj. Allahabad. In Prayagraj. There is another very famous inscription which is found in Delhi. Write down. Mehrauli iron pillar inscription. कुतुब मीनार गए कभी देखने आप? तो नेक्स्ट टाइम कुतुब मीनार अगर जाना तो विजिट दिस. इट्स वेरी नियर टू कुतुब मीनार. दिस इज द आयरन पिलर इंस्क्रिप्शन फाउंड इन मेहरौली. देयर इज अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग स्टोरी. इन फैक्ट दिस इज द पिलर which is responsible for Delhi's name. Delhi is called Delhi, and there is a very interesting, again, a story based on legend. It's not a historic story, but the story is very interesting. That when Delhi was deserted at one point of time, and then it was inhabited by a Rajput clan called Tomars. So Tomars are considered responsible for the development of modern Delhi. Tomars, however, were defeated, or perhaps they were replaced by first Chauhans, and Prithviraj Chauhan was defeated by Gauri, and that led to establishment of Delhi Sultanate. But there is a very interesting story that when Anangpal Tomar, the founder of Tomar dynasty, when he visited Mehrauli, found this inscription, then he was intrigued by it, and he called many scholars and he asked that what this pillar is all about. So there was a very famous legend involving this pillar, is that this pillar actually goes all the way down to the back of Sheshnag, because again, as per Puranas, Prithvi jo pura earth hai, that is kept by Sheshnag on his back. So Anangpal Tomar was very intrigued by it, and he started digging this pillar, that let's found that how depth it goes to. But after some time he started finding red soil, and he thought that now this is blood of Sheshnag. So of course he is now fearful that he has injured Sheshnag, so he starts again keeping all the soil back to the pillar, but still the soil jo pillar hai, that is not exactly as tight what it was initially. It remains loose, which is Dhilli. From that Dhilli, the word of Delhi is Dhillika, and from Dhillika it becomes Delhi later. So again, story again, legend involving that how Delhi का जो original नाम था, पहले जो नाम था, original नाम तो of course Hastinapur था, Hastinapur Indraprasth, and then of course it becomes Dhillika in medieval period, and from Dhillika it becomes Delhi, especially during Sultanate and Mughal period. So जो Mehrauli iron pillar of Chandragupta II है, that is also very famous inscription. Another very famous inscription is Junagadh rock inscription, Rudradaman, but at the same time also Skandagupta. Junagadh rock inscription. We have talked about the same inscription for Rudradaman also, who was a Shaka ruler. Junagadh rock inscription of Skandagupta. There is a question that do we have to remember all these sources? देखो मैंने तो बहुत सबसे जो इम्पोर्टेंट चीज़ें सिर्फ मैंने वहीं लिखा है, इसके अलावा आपको और भी बहुत सारा याद करना पड़ेगा जब आर्ट एंड कल्चर लिटरेचर में पढ़ाएंगे. आई एम वेरी श्योर दिस इज नॉट द एंड ऑफ दिस, व्हेन लिटरेरी डेवलपमेंट डिस्कस किया जाएगा. सो इन द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ लिटरेचर, जो गुप्ता पीरियड के टाइम का जो लिटरेचर है, वन ऑफ द ग्रेटेस्ट लिटरेचर विच वी फाइंड फ्रॉम एंशिएंट इंडिया इज फ्रॉम गुप्ता पीरियड. सो whatever name I have mentioned, these are the essential names. ये तो याद रखना ही रखना है, but there will be many more names जो आपको याद रखना पड़ेगा, especially from art and culture perspective. Junagadh rock inscription of Skandagupta. Another very important source can be numismatics. आप इसमें एक लाइन ऐड कर सकते हो. Guptas issued largest number of gold coins, and these coins often had religious symbols as well as king, in some cases queens also, in different poses. So this is one of the gold coin issued by Chandragupta I. These are the coins. In one coin Samudragupta is holding a veena, in another coin he is holding a weapon. So Samudragupta coins. Then you also have coins issued by Chandragupta II, Vikramaditya. This is the very famous Prayag Prashasti, which as of now has been translated, written in Sanskrit basically. Guptas use a script, I'm forgetting the name of this script, I will remember that. So Guptas use a script, can you just confirm like very quickly, this script, I'm missing, again I'm just missing the name of this script. However, that script now is of course used, it took many forms, and that includes jo modern Devanagari or all jo scripts हैं. Not Brahmi exactly, it was not Brahmi. So it was Siddhamatrika, sorry. So the script was called Siddha script or Siddhamatrika script. So Guptas used Siddhamatrika script, and that same Siddhamatrika script actually led to many of these scripts which we are using even today, including Devanagari script or even other scripts of northern India. So this is the very famous Prayag Prashasti, where we have this information about Samudragupta and his conquest. And now historians have actually been able to identify most of the rulers which are mentioned into the Prashasti of Samudragupta. So let's write about more of them, but let's take a break here. After that we will resume the class. Write down few things about Gupta Empire. Guptas are considered to be feudatories of Kushanas, with decline of Kushanas, Guptas built a stronghold with decline of Kushanas, Guptas built a stronghold in the regions of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar. Again, I am using current context के हम बात में कर रहे हैं. In the regions of Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, and from there expanded their territory. This period is often called Golden Age of Ancient India. Because of achievements in science, astronomy, literature, arts. Also, it was one of the most prosperous kingdom, one of the most prosperous empires, you can use, one of the most prosperous empires of the ancient world. Because of their surname, many historians think that they were Vaishya. Write down the next paragraph. The dynasty was founded by Sri Gupta. In around 240 AD. Who used the title of Maharaja. His son Ghatotkacha became the next ruler. son Ghatotkach became the next ruler who adopted the same title, Give the heading Chandragupta I. He is considered as the first emperor of the dynasty He strengthened his position by marrying a Lichavi princess, Kumar Devi, Kumar Devi. He issued coins in the joint names of Queen and himself. His capital was Patliputra. Whose empire included modern Bihar, Bengal, UP, and parts of MP. Samudragupta, he may have ruled from about 335 to 375 AD. Right down here. A great conqueror who followed the policy of war and conquest, as per Prayag Prashasti, he never lost a single war. In fact, a significant part of Indian subcontinent was directly or indirectly under his control. He defeated many rulers along eastern coast, even defeated even defeated Pallava rulers of Kanchi. Pallava rulers of Kanchi. However, many of these reasons were not annexed. Many of these reasons were not annexed. Many of these reasons were not annexed. Write down in next paragraph. As per a Chinese source, a ruler of Sri Lanka, Meghvarman, sent a missionary to Samudragupta, for permission to build a temple, Buddhist temple at Bodh Gaya. For permission to build a Buddhist temple at Bodh Gaya. This permission was granted. This permission was granted. After his conquest, he celebrated by performing Ashwamedh. He celebrated by performing Ashwamedh and issued coins with the legend, restorer of Ashwamedh. Issued coins with the legend, restorer of Ashwamedh. He also was, write down next paragraph, he also was an accomplished poet, a musician, and even though he was follower of Vaishnavism, he also patronized Buddhism. He is known by many legends. On the coins issued. He is known by many legends on the coins he issued, such as Apratirat, comma, Vyaghra Parakramah, so Apratirat literally will translate to someone who has never been forced to come down from his chariot. So someone basically who is invincible. And Vyaghra Parakrama will literally translate to someone who is as brave as a tiger. Write down the next paragraph. As per a play written by Vishakha Dutt, as per a play written by Vishakha Dutt, after Samudragupta, Ramgupta became the next ruler. However, he surrendered his wife to Shakas, and his brother Chandragupta too showed bravery, rescued the queen and killed the Shaka ruler. अब इसमें एक लाइन बस ऐड कर लेना. Even though historicity of this story cannot be confirmed, there are evidences of Ramgupta as a ruler. Give the next heading, Chandragupta II, also known as Vikramaditya. So if Ramgupta's story is true, then he may have ruled from about 378 to 415. But if that story is not true, then he ruled from about 376 to either 413 or 415 AD. Right on here, Gupta Empire reached its zenith during the reign of Chandragupta II. He expanded Gupta's territories, as well as entered into marriage alliances to expand Gupta's influence. For example, his daughter Prabhavati Devi was married to a Vaktak prince Rudrasen II. A Vaktak prince Rudrasen II. आप एक लाइन इसमें ऐड कर लेना. Vaktaks were allies of Guptas Vakhtaks were allies of Guptas and ruled in the Deccan region. Ruled in the Deccan region. After death of Rudrasen, Prabhavati Devi became the regent ruler. Prabhavati Devi became the regent queen. Regent queen का मतलब clear है सबको? Ruling on the behalf of a minor son. So बेटा भी बहुत छोटा है. Son is very, for example, 10 years, 12 years old. So when son becomes, let's say for example, come of the age, such as let's say 16 years old, then he can become the ruler. So meanwhile, there will be a regent ruler. Regent ruler can be mother, but in many cases there can be other regent rulers also. जैसे medieval India में आपने पढ़ा होगा, अगर आपने पढ़ा है कि अकबर जो है, he was not actually did not become the immediate ruler. Regent ruler was Bairam Khan. So there are many stories like that. So regent Prabhavati Devi became the regent queen, ruling on the behalf of her minor son. Ruling on the behalf of her minor son. Minor son. And helped her father in defeating Shakas from Gujarat, who had ruled the region for almost 4 centuries. Who had ruled the region for almost 4 centuries. After this victory, he adopted the title of Vikramaditya and Singh Vikram. Vikramaditya and Singh Vikram. He made Ujjain his second capital. His court was visited by a Chinese traveler, Fahian. His court was visited by a Chinese traveler, Fahian, who praised the reign of Chandragupta II. And one last line you can add. His court at Ujjain was adorned by 9 great scholars, known as Navratnas, आप नाम लिख सकते हो. फर्स्ट कालिदास. देखो एक हमेशा एक प्रॉब्लम ये है कि हम ट्राई टू कंपेयर स्कॉलर्स ऑफ इंडिया और रूलर्स ऑफ इंडिया फ्रॉम वेस्टर्न रूलर्स और वेस्टर्न स्कॉलर्स, एंड दैट इज एक्चुअली बिकॉज the history of India initially was written by Western historians, If you think about it, history of India, when initial excavation started and proper history writing process of India started during Britisher period, many British historians took a lot of interest into Indian history. So they often compared Indian scholars and Indian rulers with Western rulers and Western scholars. Just a very good example is Samudragupta is compared with Napoleon, that he is Napoleon of India. But clearly that is not a very good comparison. First, Samudragupta lived many years ago, hundreds of years ago. And also, Napoleon did lose war and he died into a prison. That is not true in case of Samudragupta. Similarly, Kalidas is called Shakespeare of India. Again, that comparison does not make any sense. So Kalidas himself is a very interesting, there are so many stories around him. Initially he was not a very learned person. In fact, he may have been a fool as per the legend goes. And there was a very famous, there was a very famous princess. Her name was Vidyutama. And Vidyutama basically had, she had that only person who can defeat her into Shastrarth. There was a concept of debates about philosophies, and that was called Shastrarth. So anyone who can defeat her in Shastrarth, she will marry that person. So as the story goes, that she defeats many of the great scholars, and these great scholars are of course insulted by this, and they create some sort of plot, and in this plot they find a great fool who is Kalidas, and Kalidas is married to Vidyutama. But Vidyutama very soon realizes that Kalidas is not the person she thinks he is, and she insults Kalidas. He takes that insults personally, goes, works really hard, and writes some of the greatest works, and comes back, but now he rejects his wife. And the story again continues that because of this, his wife curses him that you are going to be murdered by a courtesan, a prostitute. And then the story continues that he goes to one of these cities, and there is a local ruler, and local ruler has basically given a challenge, a puzzle, that whoever is going to solve that puzzle, he is going to marry that woman. And Kalidas solves that puzzle and gives that puzzle to a woman who is a prostitute. But then the woman realizes that maybe he is going to divulge the secret, and she murders Kalidas in her sleep. The ruler gets to know this. He also commits suicide. Because of his puzzle, Kalidas has died, and the prostitute also commits suicide. So again, lot of stories, lot of legend associated with it. But nonetheless, Kalidas, he is considered one of the greatest Sanskrit dramatists. And even before, by the way, there were some great dramatists before him. For example, another great dramatist before him is a person called Bhas. Bhas wrote some of the greatest drama. But Kalidas is often considered the greatest Sanskrit dramatist. One of the best work of Sanskrit literature was compiled by him. So आप लिख सकते हो कालिदास के बारे में. He is often called Shakespeare of India. He is often called Shakespeare of India because of his contribution to Sanskrit literature. Because of his contribution to Sanskrit literature. Another great Navratna, you have to remember the name, is Varahamir. So Varahamir was again a great astronomer as well as astrologer. A very famous book called Panch Siddhantika, which talks about lot of subjects together. It talks about geometry, it talks about astronomy, many mathematical theories together. And he is the author of this book. So, of course, from Gupta period, Aryabhat is the greatest name. But Aryabhat is not part of Navratnas. He may have lived earlier than Chandragupta II. He may have lived in Ujjain, but earlier than Chandragupta II. But Varahamir, who lived perhaps later, he was part of Navratnas. So, आप लिख सकते हो. He wrote three important books. Panch Siddhantika, book on astronomy. Panch Siddhantika, a book on astronomy. Brihad Jataka, Brihad a book on astrology, a book on astrology, and Brihad Samhita, Brihad Samhita, Brihad Samhita. It deals with many subjects. It deals with many subjects such as astronomy, astrology, architecture, astronomy, astrology, architecture, weather, among others. Third is Amar Singh or Amar Simha. अमर सिम्हा, अभी जैसे हम डिक्शनरी पढ़ते हैं, वो ऑक्सफोर्ड डिक्शनरी हम पढ़ते हैं. सो अमर सिम्हा वाज अ पर्सन हु कंपाइल्ड मेनी ऑफ द इंपॉर्टेंट संस्कृत वर्ड्स इनटू अ बुक कॉल्ड अमर कोश. सो आप लिख सकते हो, हिज वर्क अमर कोश is a vocabulary of many Sanskrit words, Then another great name is Dhanvantri. आप लिख सकते हो a great name in Ayurveda, a great name in Ayurveda. जैसे हमने बीजक पढ़ा था, बीजक was court physician of which ruler? Bimbisar. डिस्कस किया था हमने. The बीजक was court ruler of Bimbisar. Sushrut may have lived in Varanasi around 5th, 4th century BC. He is often called father of surgery. Jivak. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Jivak, not Jivak. So Jivak and Bijak is an entirely different word. So Jivak. Sorry. So next name is Charak, Shushrut, and then of course Dhanvantri. So these are some of the greatest name in the field of Ayurveda. Next, Shanku. एक लाइन बस लिख लेना यहाँ पे. He was an architect. He was an architect who wrote Shilp Shastra. He was an architect who wrote Shilp Shastra. Ghat Karpar. He was an expert in architecture and sculpture. He was an expert in architecture and sculpture. Vararuchi. He wrote a book, Prakrit Paraksha. He wrote a book, Prakrit Paraksha, about grammar of Prakrit language. Grammar of Prakrit language. Vetal Bhatt. He was a magician. He was a magician who wrote Mantra Shastra. Who wrote Mantra Shastra. Kaha Panaka. He was an astrologer. He was an astrologer who wrote Jyotish Shastra. He was an astrologer who wrote Jyotish Shastra. So I think the first two names, Dhanvantri, three names you have to know. ये थोड़ा डिटेल में पता होना चाहिए. जो वराह मीर, Kalidas of course is a very very important name. Aryabhatta was again, as I told you, Aryabhatta was not a Nauratna. He may have lived before Chandragupta too. He definitely did belong to Gupta period. He may have been patronized also. तो आर्यभट्ट को exactly pinpoint करना, he may have lived in 3rd or 4th century AD. आर्यभट्ट का जो time period है, either 3rd century AD or 4th century AD. So he definitely belonged to Gupta period, but did not belong to Chandragupta too. Chandragupta too came later than Aryabhatta. तो वराहमीर जो है, he was one of the Nauratnas. But again, there are many names. जैसे think about Shudrak, जो मृच्छकटिका है. Shudrak is a great poet. जो मृच्छकटिका is considered one of the greatest poetry, not just in Indian literature. It is very famous all across the world. There are Oscar nominated. In fact, there are movies which have won Oscar who have portrayed मृच्छकटिका as their central play. There is a very famous movie called Moulin Rouge. Moulin Rouge जो movie है, that actually has one of the central play of that movie is मृच्छकटिका, right? So it's one of the great books of ancient India. And Shudrak, again giving the time period or location about Shudrak, he calls himself a king, but exactly which region's king, that is not very clear. He may have lived either during Gupta period in the initial age or before Gupta period, right? तो जो पूरा time period है about 3rd to 6th century AD, that is called golden age of ancient India because of this contribution into so many literary developments. This is, again, these are very few names. Give the next heading, Kumar Gupta. So Kumar Gupta may have ruled from 415 to 455 AD. There is a question that how many more lectures for this subject? Maximum 2, right? So almost once I complete, Gupta is a huge topic. We are going to talk about the administration, society, economy in much more detail about that. So that will take almost 1 class. And बाकी जो topics हैं, for example, I will talk about Harshvardhan, and the reign of Harshvardhan, the end of Harshvardhan often marks the end of ancient India, and after that what we can call is early medieval India. So we will talk about some aspects of early medieval India. We will talk about some political as well as social and economic development into India. We will talk about that. For example, but medieval India जो है आपका, वो आपका शुरू होगा राजपूत रूल से. जो राजपूत हैं and invasion of मोहम्मद गजनी and मोहम्मद गौरी जो है, वहाँ से आपका medieval India शुरू होगा. Right, so I think maximum 2 lecture for this topic. Write down few things about Kumar Gupta. He adopted the titles of Shakraditya and Mahendraditya. He adopted the titles of and Mahendraditya, Shakraditya and Mahendraditya. He laid the foundation of Nalanda University, Nalanda University, which emerged as an institution of international reputation. As an institution of international reputation. International reputation. नालंदा अभी भी आप चाहोगे, so नालंदा जो ruins हैं, नालंदा was of course destroyed by बख्तियार खिलजी. So नालंदा यूनिवर्सिटी की जो ruins हैं, even today if you go there, the walls are really thick. It was of course a very strong architecture, and the walls and the type of bricks which are used, you can still see that there are three type of bricks. The first brick, which was led by Kumar Gupta, who laid the foundation of Nalanda University. The second development occurred during Harshvardhan, and the third development occurred during Pala rulers. We'll talk about Palas in medieval India, or also in early medieval India का जो part है वहाँ पे हम Palas cover करेंगे. So you still can find this three different type of bricks which was used for construction, and even today, for example, जो नालंदा का construction है, whatever is left, ये जो wall है, like it's 5 times more thicker than walls you can find it. हाँ, ज़्यादा ही होगा इसे, ज़्यादा ही होगा, of course. And if you ever visit Nalanda University, you should definitely go with a guide, because otherwise you can only see, in general I think that whenever you are visiting a historical site, you should definitely hire a guide, because otherwise you are only going to see a ruin, you will not be able to visualize the significance of a particular place. So definitely hire a guide and just know about Nalanda and know about its significance. Anyways, write down the next paragraph. At the end of his reign, invasions started in the northwest frontier. Invasions started in the northwest frontier by a nomadic group called Huns, who originated in Central Asia. However, Prince Skandgupta successfully thwarted this invasion. Prince Skandgupta successfully thwarted this invasion. Give the next heading. Skandgupta. So Skandgupta ruled from about 455 to 467 AD. He can be considered as the last great emperor. He can be considered as the last great emperor of Gupta dynasty. He defeated Hunas and adopted the title of Vikramaditya. He also contributed to repair of Sudarshan Lake He also contributed to repair of Sudarshan Lake. By the way, this is the same lake which is also mentioned in an inscription of Rudradaman. He also contributed to repair of Sudarshan Lake, which is part of Junagadh rock inscription. Junagadh rock inscription. After his death, his successors were not able to thwart the continuous attacks from Hunas, not able to thwart the continuous attack by Huns, as well as could not control regional aspirations. So before I talk about the society and economy in detail, one last heading from the political history. Give this heading: Decline of Gupta Empire. There are mainly two reasons, but those two reasons led to, of course, many more reasons because of that Gupta Empire decline. The first reason is the attack by Huns. Huns were very persistent in their attack, even though they were initially defeated by Skandagupta, but they were very persistent. They had nothing to lose as such. They were great horse riders also. Now Guptas had also invested a lot into their cavalry. अभी तक क्या था, गुप्तास के पहले chariots पे बहुत ज़्यादा focus था, but Guptas actually invested a lot into cavalry. So even their cavalry was very powerful, but a successive attack that depleted the treasury. Once the treasury is depleted, you cannot think that you can rule over a very large region. We know that the treasury got depleted because you do not find gold coins of later Gupta ruler. After Skandagupta, you do not find gold coins. You only find copper coins and silver coins. So gold was completely depleted at this point of time. Same Gupta rulers who had issued the largest number of gold coins. So Huna's invasion में there are two names which are very important. You have to remember these two names. First is a ruler called Tormana. Tormana did lot of destruction, especially जो पूरा northwest frontier है, region of Punjab. He caused lot of destruction. He in fact attacked many cities such as Ujjain and Mathura also. When Tormana died, his son Mihirkul, that is the second name you have to remember. His son Mihirkul became the Huna ruler, Huna chief. Now Mihirkul is mentioned into many texts. For example, Mihirkul is mentioned into Buddhist text. He is also mentioned into Raj Tarangini, a book written about history of Kashmir. There is a very famous book called Raj Tarangini. That can be considered the very first book of history written into India. That is written by a person called Kalahan. But Raj Tarangini only talks about the political history of Kashmir. So Tormana son Mihirkul is mentioned in Raj Tarangini also and in Buddhist text also, and in both these texts Mihirkul is considered as a great enemy of Buddhism. He destroys many stupas, he kills many Buddhist monks. There are stories behind it that why he might have done it. Initially he wanted to accept Buddhism. There is a story like this. Again, we do not know how true that story is, but because of his cruelty, the Buddhist monks did not accept this request, and because of that he became enemy of Buddhism. So anyways, Mihirkul was finally defeated by an alliance of some ruler, including Guptas. But in this alliance, the most important role was played by a ruler of Malwa. His name was Yashodharman. And Yashodharman was a very brave ruler. He was not a Gupta ruler, but he was actually the contributing factor in defeat of Mihirkul. After this defeat, Yashodharman did not accept the authority of Guptas, and that led to many more rulers who did not accept the authority of Guptas, including, for example, Pushyabhutis of Thanesar, the same Pushyabhutis which led to next great ruler, the last great ruler of North India from ancient India, Harshvardhan. So many local rulers which till this point of time were under Gupta's authority, many of them declared their independence, and that led to emergence of many smaller feudal chiefs, and some of those feudal chiefs of course became more powerful in future. So there are two main reasons. First is this external invasion, and second is that because of this external invasion, Guptas were not able to basically take care of the regional rebellions. And of course that led to economic weaknesses, treasury got depleted, you cannot maintain a very large army. Overall trade also got declined because of a successive attack, जो पूरा एक prosperous trade था, and all of these important manufacturing centers into India, their output further declined. So all of those reasons combined together led to decline of Gupta Empire. But nonetheless, the legacy of Gupta that continued for many more years. तो आप लिख सकते हो, first reason is Hun invasion. Hun invasion. Hun invasion. Huns were great horse riders and expert archers. Huns were great horse riders and expert archers. They were responsible for not just the decline of Guptas, but also decline of Roman Empire. Hun chief Tormana conquered many regions in Western India. By 485 AD, Huns had occupied many regions of Punjab, Kashmir, Malwa, parts of central India, Tormana was succeeded by his son Mihirkul. Mihirkul has been portrayed as a tyrant ruler. And enemy of Buddhism. In Buddhist texts, as well as Raj Tarangini, written by Kalhan. Raj Tarangini hai, this is History of Kashmir. तो ये जो बुक है, by the way, this book can be considered the first book which was written in India as a book of history. That from historical, even though it had some elements which cannot be historical, for example, elements of magic and all that, but nonetheless, this is a very important source to know about history of Kashmir. Right on here, Mihirkul was defeated. Mihirkul was defeated, and Hunas were overthrown. Hunas were overthrown by a ruler named Yashodharman. A ruler named Yashodharman from Malwa. A ruler named Yashodharman from Malwa. And second reason is rise of regional kingdoms. Rise of regional kingdoms. Right on. Many regional rulers such as Yashodharman, Pushyabhuti, Mokharis, among others, did not accept Gupta's authority. By end of 5th and early 6th century. By end of 5th and early 6th century. Thus Gupta rule got limited to region around Patliputra. Region around Patliputra. So this is about the political history at this period of time. Again, I am talking about a history from about mid of 3rd century, 250 AD, till mid of, not exactly mid of, but almost end of 5th century, 500 AD. That almost a period of about 250 years. जो initial 50 years हैं, they are empire building process. But by 321 AD, a proper empire has emerged. And that empire continued for about more than 200 years. But by the year 500 AD, this empire had actually now declined, and by 550, जो Gupta Empire है, that vanishes. And that led to emergence of many smaller rulers. But those smaller rulers were compiled into one major rule by next political history जो हम discuss करेंगे, वो हम हर्षवर्धन के बारे में पढ़ेंगे, who by the way belong to Pushyabhuti dynasty. Pushyabhutis ruled from Thanesar. Thanesar is in modern day Haryana. But later of course they ruled almost entire of North India. तो ये हम डिस्कस करेंगे नेक्स्ट पॉलिटिकल हिस्ट्री. बट बिफोर दैट वी विल टॉक अबाउट द सोसाइटी एंड इकोनॉमी स्पेशली. दिस टू आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट एज वेल एज religious development at this period of time during Gupta period. So, but we will discuss that in the next class, right? So, we will require 2 more classes. So, in next class, first half of the class, we will talk about the social, economic and religious development during this period of time. Then we will talk about Harshvardhan, and if time permits, we can also start our discussion about what is happening into Deccan region and southern region, right? So, now we have jumped from almost there is a gap of एक चीज बहुत why we are not talking about this period from about 4th, 5th, 6th century into southern India, and that I told you in the last class itself, because we do not have lot of information about this period into southern India. This age is called Kalbharas age, and Kalbharas, who are exactly Kalbharas, that remains even today a very debatable issue, and many historians think that they may have been local tribes who were not happy with lot of developments. But by 6th century, of course, we have emergence of some small kingdoms, and those small kingdoms became very powerful. The first name I am going to discuss, that will be Pallavas. Then I will talk about Chalukyas, right? And then we will of course discuss about Rashtrakutas, Palas and Pratiharas. So along with Harshvardhan, we will talk about Pallavas, Chalukyas, Rashtrakutas, Palas, Pratiharas. That will conclude our discussion about ancient as well as some part of early medieval India. जो medieval India का जो discussion होगा, that will start from imperial Cholas in South India as well as invasion from northwest India by Muhammad Ghazni and later by Muhammad Ghori, right? So it will take about 2 classes to complete this topic of ancient history. So I will see you guys in the next class.